What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to the channel. I'm not even going to bother to ask you guys if you're having a great start to your day like I usually do, because I'm not, which means you're probably not, and that's all in hand with the Mets' lack of success in the second half of the season. They have been absolutely abysmal and are now hanging on by just a thread to potentially still make playoffs coming out of the NL East. Players are having contradictory words when it comes to should we be positive, negative when holding things accountable with the team's lack of success over the past couple weeks in post-game pressers. Zach Scott, the current GM for the New York Mets, has had his choice words on the team's mediocrity and even playing below that over the past week in a presser. And even Steve Cohen, the owner of the New York Mets, has tweeted out earlier this morning some very blunt choice words on the offensive production, really the lack thereof, and what this can inevitably mean for the club going forward, not just for the remainder of the season, but beyond, and making some major changes to this club and overall organization. So that's what I'll be breaking down in today's video. Everything there is to know about Steve Cohen's comments here, how you should interpret them for a positive and or negative side of things, and ultimately what this can mean for things beyond. And if you guys end up enjoying this kind of Mets content and you want to see more great Mets content like this, please do not hesitate from smashing that like and subscribe button, sharing this video with your friends, put on the notification bell, all those great things. Thank you so much for the continued support, guys. But without further ado, let's jump right into today's video. All right, Mets fans, we all know the story with them right now. They've lost 5 straight games, woke up today after another tough loss in which they've lost 2 consecutive series now, this time being the San Francisco Giants on their away trip. Now here we have Steve Cohen this morning at the time of recording this through Twitter, tweets the following. It's hard to understand how professional hitters can be this unproductive. The best teams have a more disciplined approach, and the slugging and OPS numbers do not lie. He's 100% right. I think that when you see Steve Cohen tweet something like this, you understand that from a fan side of things, you wholeheartedly agree. I know I do, and I know a lot of other Mets fans that see this right now absolutely do. There's no denying that. But where this comes in with the controversy and how this can drastically impact for the club, potentially for the better, potentially for the worse, even though I think that there is more upside than downside here, my humble opinion, is the fact that this is Steve Cohen, okay? This is not just a normal fan out here tweeting this, and this is something that he has gotten plenty of flack for in months past. Since he became owner of the Mets, he comes in, he's this high-rolling multi-billionaire. He's by far the richest owner in all baseball from an individual standpoint, and he has been very blunt and has had plenty of choice words on social media, being very witty at times, sarcastic, whatever it is, and the rival executives have reportedly been joking about it, think it's a laughingstock, where I've even been worried about it, knowing that Steve Cohen is intimidating. You have fellow fans, opposing fans that are having all their kind of choice words about the matter, but no less, Steve Cohen is very blunt, and he is someone that is breaking societal norms right now. Let me know how many others and other owners in major league sports that you see going out on Twitter making these comments, whether it's something that was very premeditated or something that was more emotional based. Steve, did he wake up today and just felt that he needed to get that off his chest, or is this something that he's been wanting to say for a while but was waiting until the Mets found themselves in the hole that they are currently in? I'm not sure, and that's why all this controversy is going on, because you have people in favor of what is happening right now saying, thank you, Steve. Finally, a diehard Mets fan is a Mets owner, and he understands where we are coming from. We trust in you that you're going to make the right changes. Now, I find myself more in that category personally, because again, the Mets did not get bought by Steve Cohen without him being the diehard Mets fan. Okay, if he wasn't a diehard Mets fan, he wouldn't be here. He isn't owning the Mets for an investment side of things. He's doing it because it's something that he's always wanted to do. He grew up a diehard Mets fan, and it's something that I always hope would come to fruition to actually own them if they were available to buy, which was the case back last fall from the Wilpons, and then here we are today. But the negative side of things come from people that are saying, oh, how dare this, multi-billionaire come in here and have the audacity to say this about his players on his team, his overall roster. This is not a good look. How is this going to benefit players that would originally like to come to the Mets in the offseason or even via trade, now that find themselves wanting to be pushed away, knowing that their owner can be very blunt on social media to the public about their lack of success? Well, I understand those side of things too. So to break them down a little bit further here, the positive side of things, perfectly understand. I love the fact that he's a diehard fan. The negative side of things, everyone's entitled to have their own opinion there. I respectfully understand that. I don't necessarily agree with all the notion that is going on, because I think there is a disconnect right now on what we are perceiving and what's the actual truth. Is he targeting strictly the players on the roster, or is he targeting the Mets as a whole? I think it's really the Mets as a whole from a management perspective, because again, if you have Steve Cohen going the lengths of making this public, but you're not necessarily having the manager and Louis Rojas or potentially Zach Scott, the GM, being more blunt about the situation, that's not a great look for them, and maybe it's not a great look for Steve, but he's trying to get a fire under this team's ass, and this is something that has been evident. I believe that his tweet here is the hope that the Mets are going to really rally together as a club down the stretch with 42 games left at the time of recording this, and really come together. And for the players that see this tweets, take it in a positive light and not a negative one, knowing that their owner is dissatisfied. And from everything that I've seen, most Mets, if not all Mets, thoroughly enjoy Steve Cohen as Mets owner. He's in constant contact with the players too. They like all of his phone number. He has a very personal connection with them. So if they come across his tweet and his comments, the hope is that they're going to take it for the better, but the risk is that they're going to take it as a negative side of things, a slight, and maybe that continues to go in a downward spiral for them for the remainder of the year. That is a risk, but for me personally, I understand why Steve Cohen is doing it, even if it isn't as pretty. Again, everyone's going to have their personal opinions. But now this comes down to, is Steve Cohen right, and how is this going to drastically impact the club potentially going forward? Well, first of all, he's absolutely right. Steve Cohen, look at the Mets. He knows what the Mets are doing. They're 59-60 on the season. Worst record they've had for the longest time. When was the last time this season the Mets were below 500, okay? This is the same club that was 10 games above 500 in June for their higher peak of the season, even when they still had endless injuries. They were 10 games over 500. They're now 1 game back, could be another game back depending on how today's day game goes against the Giants in the series finale. Again, maybe you'll know that by now by the time you watch this video probably, but still, the Mets have been slumping, to put it lightly. Even with all their injuries and the terrible schedule with all the doubleheaders, it is hard to justify the lack of offensive success this team has had, especially in the second half when the majority of the club has been healthy from an offensive side of things, even without Lindor and Baez as of recent. They're 4.5 games back now at first place after being 5 games in front in first just over the past 19 days. So you're telling me over a 19 to 20 day span, they go from leading the division by at least 5 games to now back by almost 5 games? That's horrendous. 5 straight losses for this club since the All-Star break. They're 12-20 on the year, one of the worst records in all of baseball during that span. They're 28th still in RBIs for the MLB. They're 26th in home runs, 28th in runs scored, 24th in batting average, 19th in on-base percentage, 26th in slugging, 24th in OPS, and 29th in total bases. Everyone's underperforming. Everyone, okay? Even Pete Alonso, who has been carrying this team on his back, in which he's gained slander left and right about how dare you say to be smile and stay positive. This is a New York market. I understand that, but give kudos to Pete because he's actually still carrying this team single-handedly. Had a bomb last night to actually make it an interesting game for the Mets still, only down by a run. He's had multiple bombs as of late. He has been one of the main bright spots by far for this club, and it really is few and far in between outside of that. So now you have what is next for this club. What does this mean to see Steve Cohen make these comments? What does the future mean for them, not just going into the offseason, but potentially down the stretch this year? When we take a look at where the Mets currently stand this season and what the future is, let's start with Luis Rojas, okay? Because a lot of people either love Luis Rojas, hate him, feel in the middle. I have been pretty much in the middle and a little bit more positive really up until the second half of the season has began. I've been heavily advocating for this guy and saying how important it has been for him to help this team through the adversity that they had earlier this year with everyone single-handedly injured on this roster. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The Mets have had more injuries this year than ever in their entire existence as an organization, which tells you so much about this team this year, given the fact that they get endless injuries, it feels, every single year. So, Luis Rojas, give him credit there, but now here we are in the second half, and there are some major problems on his point. So, is the Mets and Zach Scott, are they going to go the lengths of fire Luis Rojas before the season even ends? Now, while nothing is impossible, I'm going to say I will be surprised if it happens. So don't quote me in saying, oh, you never thought it was going to happen. I'm going to say right now, I will be surprised if it does. Nothing's impossible, but where the Mets currently stand, how much of a drastic change are you going to get by firing Rojas with only 40 plus games left in the season and hanging on by a thread with playoffs? I'm not personally sure, but again, maybe that's something the Mets do, but rest assured, I've been saying this all year long. If the Mets do not make playoffs this year, there's no reason why Rojas should be here again. There's a reason why the Mets did not extend him going into the season to begin with, because they want to see how he did first. They fired Chili Davis, a hitting coach, the first 2 months of the season, and look what's happened. Nothing. The offense has actually gone worse, which is crazy. So you have to wonder, how much is this to blame on Rojas? How much is this to blame on the systematic problem that is the Mets and not focusing on offense or runners in scoring position? They're anemic to it. It's horrendous what we have been seeing. I've never seen anything like it. So Rojas, again, if the Mets don't make playoffs, I think he's kicked the can. I think he's gone. And then we'll explore at that point in time who will be the next manager for the Mets, potentially long term. And then when you look at if the Mets do make playoffs somehow, some way, and do have a deep run potentially somehow, some way this year, Rojas, that is where you can justify keeping him, extending him. But that is the only scenario where it seems likely. Outside of that, it looks like more, but as each passing day goes on with the Mets continuing to have a lack of success, so will be the future of Luis Rojas with the Mets. It does not seem likely right now, but I will not give you a date on if he will and or at all will be fired, because I simply can't, I don't know right now, and I don't think anyone knows, but we're very anxious to see what the future holds on that front. What does this happen with Zach Scott? I think Zach Scott is still going to be the GM for the Mets going into the offseason. I think he'll be made the permanent GM, but what does this mean for others when it comes to hitting coaches, when it comes to training staff? Again, Mets have had endless injuries, and I know it's not just them across the board we've seen with players getting adjusted to a normal 162 season again after having the shortened year last year, not being able to be as active because of the pandemic, gyms not available as open. A lot of factors go into this. I think it gets overlooked, guys, given the fact that this has been the craziest past year that we have ever witnessed. But still, you have to realize that the Mets, at the end of the day, things need to be held accountable. So maybe we're going to see some changes in training staff. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it wouldn't be surprising. Are we going to see changes with the hitting coaches? We very well can. At this point, it wouldn't be surprising either. I think Zach Scott stays, though, for GM, and Sandy Alderson, he might be gone before we know it. Again, I cannot give you my word on anything, but you'd have to wonder and assume that bigger changes are going to happen soon, because Theo Epstein, a guy that has been connected to the Mets as a potential fit for president baseball operations. Steve Cohen has been reported to say that he's looking for a big name in that position, and Theo Epstein would check off all the boxes and then some. So we'll see what the future holds here, not just for down the season, but in the offseason. We'll be talking about it plenty. But the Mets have already had their offseason outlook addressed and out there for anyone that's interested. Over the past week, it has been reported that the Mets would very much like to upgrade, get ready for this, surprise, surprise, third base, corner outfield. It's almost like they tried to do that this past offseason. Yes, they're doing it again because they did not get enough done in the offseason. They feel at this point players have underperformed. And also, when you look at the trade deadline, they were really strapped with the deals that they can make. And no, Chris Bryant was not available. They tried their absolute hardest to make it happen, but the Cubs were not willing to part ways with Bryant to the Mets, given their prospects available. And the Mets were not going to give up their top 3 prospects in a deal for a rental in that situation. It wasn't going to happen. So they got Javi Baez, as we know. We'll see what Javi can do down the stretch and beyond for them. But pitching wise, there really wasn't anything available either for the Mets, and I'll be breaking down that further. But no less, they want to address all this going into the offseason, and we may see some of these core players gone with the club, either because they're hitting free agency or because the Mets decided to part ways with them. Regardless of the outcome of the season, guys, if the Mets make playoffs, have a deep run, I think the only exception is if they win the World Series, which we all know. We feel pretty confident right now. Anything's possible, but we're feeling pretty confident that that's not going to happen. So the assumption that the Mets don't even make playoffs, you damn sure can expect the Mets to make major changes going into this offseason and even before that. So guys, let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. How do you feel about Steve Cohen's comments here? Do you agree with him? Do you disagree with him? What's your overall perception on having a owner that is so blunt with his comments on social media? And how do you think this is going to impact the club? And what kind of major changes do you hope or overall expect to happen in either the coming weeks down the stretch or overall just in the offseason? Let me know it all in the comments. And guys, if you ended up enjoying this kind of Mets content and you want to see more great Mets content like this, as always, please do not hesitate from smashing that like and subscribe on, sharing this video with your friends, on the notification bell, all those great things. Thank you all so much for the continued support, guys. I know that things are definitely looking dark and gloomy for this club right now, but rest assured there will always be positives and light at the end of the tunnel, whether that's still this season or beyond going the offseason next year. Rest assured it will happen, so bear with me. I know we're all going through this together, but thank you all again, and I'll talk to you soon. Let's go Mets.